Eso. Les presento a Michael. Michael, your Spanish is not that good.
No, ¿hay alguien que no hable inglés aquí? ¿Todos hablan inglés?
Pero,
Awesome.
bien. Mira, 1 minute. La presentación va a ser en inglés. Michael es el fundador de una compañía que se llama Priceonomics.
Sí, he fundado 2 empresas en los Estados Unidos que fueron que recibieron inversión de venture capitalists, pero voy a hablar del mercado aquí, no del mercado en los Estados Unidos.
Perfecto. Participó de Y-Combinator, que es la incubadora en Estados Unidos. Levantó capital con Crutch Fund de Michael Arrington, con Spark Capital y con Andreessen Horowitz, que es sin duda uno de los fondos más connotados de Silicon Valley, según mi impresión. Así que aquí tenemos a los top de levantamiento de capital, así que los dejo con Michael y thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you guys for having me. That's a very nice introduction. So I'm going to be talking about seed capital, and by that I mean $100,000 US to $2 million. So if you're looking at more or less money, that's great, but that's not what this is going to be about. So how to raise seed capital in South America, and really I think the answer is unfortunately don't. Until you're ramen profitable. Ramen profitable means that you can pay your rent, you can pay your servers, you can pay for food. Once you have that, you can raise money. But until you can do that, it's a really tough sell, and here's why. So here's what motivates seed investors, at least at home. And I'm not an expert in Chile or South America, so I hope that I'm not too off, but this is based on what I've heard and what I see. At home, it's all about fear of missing out. People hate to have a deal close that they wanted to get in that they couldn't. Probably about 25% of the money invested in a round comes the minute before the press release, because that's when they hear it's full, it's about to go out, they want to scramble to get in, and once they miss the press release, they don't really care. So that's kind of the close. There's also an element of being cool. I mean, it's ridiculous that Ashton Kutcher is an angel investor. He's already pretty cool, but it helps him even more. And everyone else wants to be like that. Making money, seed stage investors don't really make money. And wanting to give back. Of course they say that, but then when you're negotiating, it doesn't really feel like they want to give back. Fear of missing out is 10 times more important than anything else on this list. It's what drives everything. And one of the biggest ways to demonstrate that is that companies never get one term sheet. It's incredibly rare. You get 0, that's what most get, and some get 2 or more. But you never get 1. It's very rare that only one person wants to invest. Investors want to invest in companies that other people want to invest in. And this is what drives the prices and the terms. When you read about crazy high valuations, you don't see the terms, which is arguably more important. But it's all driven by people competing against each other. And you often have this experience, like, why is this investor taking so long to get back to me? We've met 10 times. I've showed him all my info. He keeps saying next week. It's his job to wait. He should do that. And it's obviously very much it ends with your goals, which is what sucks. But the longer that he waits, the more information that he has, and the more desperate you are for his money. So your only weapon to close investors is their fear of missing out. You have to be able to say the round is closing without you. So for that reason, I don't even think companies should raise money in New York. I've cashed checks from New York investors, but from San Francisco. I've never gone to New York to raise money. And the reason is simply there are so many more investors in San Francisco than New York that people fear they're going to miss out. So what about Chilean investors? Well, again, it's all about fear of missing out. There need to be at least 10 times as many active investors. You've heard a lot of people earlier today talk about how there aren't that many investors or that they're not writing checks. Well, when you're the only game in town, you know it. But still you're thinking, well, I could raise from one of them. The terms are terrible. These are things you'll find. I don't know how common they are. I just know that people come to me and they say, what does this mean? And I say, really? They asked for full ratchet, anti-dilution? That still exists. Participating preferred, people have that. So you get low valuations, which means you give up a huge chunk of your company very early on. Because of that, there's board seats for seed rounds. I've heard of participating preferred stock. I don't know how common it is. Greater than 1x liquidation preference seems very common. Full ratchet anti-dilution, I've heard that asked for. Warrant coverage I've seen. These are things that US funds would not ask for, or at least the top ones, on a seed deal because they don't want to get a bad reputation. They do seed investing to try to be cool. They do seed investing so that when you're going for your A round, you'll go to them. And so they wouldn't ask for these things, but you see them here. And it won't protect your downside. So there's no M&A market for acqui-hires. You're not gonna, it's very hard to get bought for $10 million and have an event that's favorable to the founders. Of course, that's not a great event. It's not very good for the employees. But even that downside doesn't exist. Then there's always this situation I hear a lot. Oh, but this company on TechCrunch, they raised a bunch of money from US investors. Their team, website, market, product are ugly. You know, I'm better. And TechCrunch only writes about the companies that succeed in raising money. They're all the outliers. What you don't read in TechCrunch is all the companies that tried and failed. And also, keep in mind, TechCrunch is companies that were raising for a US market from US investors. So the fact that it's happening doesn't make it comparable. And then you say, but my company only needs X. They're raising these huge valuations. I only need a little. And the answer is, unfortunately, that it's just not fair. And that sucks. I wish I had a better message. It's not my rule. But it is the reality. So should you go to a fundraising trip to San Francisco? No, they won't write you a check. And they'll lie if you ask. But the easiest way to look is that the seed investments are always made public. People love to talk about their seed investment. Later investments oftentimes aren't. So you can tell which US companies are actually writing checks to foreigners operating companies in foreign countries. And they don't do it. They'll say come, they'll say if we hear something great, but they won't write a check. Still come if you want to have a cool trip or a nice experience, but have your expectations set accordingly. Well, should you move to the US? No, not without a visa. And unfortunately, visa policy in the US is terrible. And it's not going to change for a long time. If you have a girlfriend or boyfriend, you might consider getting married. It is the only free pass. It is so hard to get a visa in the US. I've had friends who've had to stop fundraising from US investors because they need an investor visa of $500,000 in foreign capital, US dollars, per founder to let them stay in the US. And they have to turn down American investors. Even though they are a US company operating in the US, they can't accept American investment because it would hurt their visa status. Companies in Y-Combinator get sent back to their home country sometimes because they can't stay. The visa situation is really bad. I've had co-founders go back to their home country because they're, well, this is being recorded, so I can just say they had to go back to their home countries and they staggered their trips in case both of them couldn't make it back. So at least they could know that one of them could make it back. The visa situation in the US sucks. If you're an engineer, you can easily get a job and it will pay you 3 times better than what you make here. So you should think about that. The cost of living is fairly comparable. But it will be a work visa and you can't start a company with it. So again, you'd have to get married. So what should you do? Well, the big thing is all of this may sound like a downer, but you don't actually need to raise money. You can always just become profitable. Fundraising becomes very, very easy for profitable companies. Terms are way better. Prices are way better. Being profitable changes everything. So for me, the whole focus is getting profitable. Once you're profitable, it's a different game. And that's the thing that is amazing about Chile, is this is the only country in the world that I know of that you get $40,000 for free. That is unbelievable. Now you have to do a lot of work to actually get that money, but still, that is pretty cool. And you might say, oh, but I feel like I'm missing out. All these other people are getting this money. Well, now you know what it feels like to have fear of missing out. It motivates decisions that maybe shouldn't otherwise be made. But keep in mind, GitHub built a $600 million business before raising a penny. It is the best way to go if you can do it. And if you can't, seriously question what you're doing. If your customers won't give you money for what you're doing, why should an investor? The customers really should be your first investment. And you might say, oh, but raising money is so great. Well, it can be, and it certainly sounds that way if you read TechCrunch. But there are a lot of negatives. The most obvious one is you give up ownership, which sucks. It's your company. And you shift your focus to investors. And either that's because you're fundraising, or because you have a monthly board meeting, or an investor asked for something. And so you kind of start to have to do those things instead of what your users want, which is ultimately what matters. It becomes harder to pivot. It becomes harder to control costs. This may seem like a silly thing, but it's very hard to maintain a scrappy startup culture when you have $1 million in the bank. And so everything starts getting more expensive. People want higher salaries, people want nicer equipment, people want all this stuff, which is great. But then if you run out of money and you haven't built a business, then you're really in trouble. More pressure. Startups already have a lot of pressure. Now you have somebody else's money. And you almost have a boss. They're not your boss yet, but you know that as you raise more money, they're going to own more and more, and they're going to become your boss. So it's like you're grooming your own boss over time. Or they're grooming you, depending on how you look at it. So what to do? Write code and talk to users. It's most of what counts, and all it costs is your time. And you can also get money to pay for your expenses here, which is amazing. And to end, this is my favorite cartoon. It's two dogs sitting next to a computer, and the caption in the New Yorker says, "On the internet, no one knows you're a dog." On the internet, nobody has any idea who you are. They just use your website, and they judge it based on its merits. So that's unbelievable. It's the most meritocratic place there is. Fundraising, maybe not so much, but you have that opportunity. So I hope that's inspiring, but also a more realistic or different take on fundraising. Thank you.
¿Alguna pregunta puedo ayudar a traducir si es necesario?
Angel list.
In the US, we say, we kind of compare AngelList to Craigslist. I guess, well, Craigslist isn't really big here. Craigslist is this anonymous service that's really crappy, but it works. AngelList is a great product. Naval and Nivi, the founders, are past investors. I've hired people, engineers off AngelList before without paying a commission. So it is a great product. I've raised most. I've never used AngelList to raise money, but it's because intros from people. The best way to raise money is an intro from somebody who wrote a check. When an investor writes another investor and says, "Hey, I just gave this guy $150,000. I think you should meet with him," the answer is always, "Hey, what time are you available?" And that meeting is so much better. So AngelList is not a bad thing, but it's very, very hard to capture that. And they try to do that with like seeing what all the other investors are following. It's free, so there's not really a reason to not do it. But it does make it seem like the capital is a lot closer than it is. You know, typically people report with AngelList that they get a lot of meetings and not a lot of investment. So what I recommend companies in San Francisco do, and I don't know if it applies here, is to save it till the end of their round when they already have enough money that they don't need more money, and then they can be much more selective about it. And I have had guys who write emails in all caps with AOL accounts write six-figure checks. So it doesn't mean that those people can't invest. It just means you could spend a lot of time and get nothing.
Hello. Yeah. Can you explain a little bit further how come foreign companies in the U.S. had to turn down money from the U.S.? I didn't get that.
Yeah. So
I'm sure lots of people more didn't get that too.
Sorry if I'm not speaking that clearly. So this is the investor. It's an investor visa. I don't know that much how it works. I fortunately was born in the U.S., so I don't have to deal with this system. But it is a terrible system from everything that I've heard. And basically, there's a way that if you bring $500,000 of foreign capital into the U.S., you can get a visa. And if you have multiple founders, then it's $500,000 per person. And so they were saying, well, we only want to raise, maybe $1.5 million, and two of us are foreigners, so 1 million of that 1.5 has to come from abroad. So once we've already, there's only $500,000 for U.S. investors, and once they've raised $500,000, if they're going to stick with their plan of only raising 1.5 million, they can't take any more dollars from Americans. Now, that's an extreme edge case. This was a Y-Combinator company. But it just goes to show how hard it is. And, even at YC's level, even where people have money to pay expensive lawyers, it is not an easy process. It is really brutal. And I don't have any secrets except for get married. It's the only one.
When do you choose raise money and fast growing or not raise money and slow growing? When do you think this is time to get money, or it's better to go slow?
Yeah, typically entrepreneurs are just like, feel like they've been doing the same thing forever. And so the prospect of money is really sexy and fun and like, I want to step on the gas. In terms of when you should do it, I mean, you know your business better than me, so that's very hard for me to say. But the thing is, you absolutely shouldn't consider it until you're ramen profitable. Before that, it is really tough because you're going to work so hard to get this money, and then your hands are going to be tied with what you do with it. And if people aren't starting to pay you money for what you've got already, it's very tough to know if they're going to in the future. They might. It might just mean that you need more users or more scale, or, you know, get 1 billion users and throw advertising up. But a much better sign is people are paying you money now. You know, then you know that works. That's what I recommend. I know that's not the most helpful advice, but I think it is that ambiguous. One way to get money is to become profitable. How profitable do you need to be? Just barely, just the littlest bit. Enough to know that people want to pay for what you're building. So it's really at a unit economics. You could even, although now we're really splitting hairs, but you could even be profitable in terms of all your operating expenses, but not able to pay, say, your salary, for example. And so now we know that every new customer, every new user you sign up, you make more money. So you just need to sign up enough and you can start covering your fixed costs. But of course, better would be to be more profitable. I mean, the more profitable you are, the less you need the money. The less you need the money, the easier it is to get. So, you know, for me, that is like always the focus and the push. But it doesn't mean that it can't work other ways. Does that help?
Michael, thank you very much for your time and being here.
I hope it's helpful. Thank you, guys.
Well,